Rain swept across the dark plains of Montana Territory, 1878. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of cottonwood trees, and lightning split the horizon into jagged pieces of light. Inside a lonely ranch house that sat like a stubborn shadow against the storm, a man stood by the window, staring into nothingness. His name was Elias Brogan, known across the valley as the Giant of Bitter Creek, a man whose silence carried more weight than most men's rage. His broad shoulders filled the doorway, his hands rough from years of taming horses and fencing land that never seemed to stay still. The fire in the hearth had long since dimmed to ash, and so had the one inside him. He'd buried his wife and son 3 winters ago, fever taking them like thieves in the night. Since then, Elias had spoken to no one except his foreman and the cattle. Words, he figured, were useless things. They couldn't bring back the dead. Thunder rolled. He set his coffee mug down, the sound echoing in the quiet. Then, 3 soft knocks at the door. He frowned. Nobody came up this far, not at this hour, not in a storm like this. The knocks came again, louder, faster, desperate. Elias crossed the room in 3 long strides, hand brushing the rifle by the wall, then pulled open the heavy oak door. A small figure stood there, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered against her face. A little girl, no more than 8. Her dress was torn, her bare feet caked in mud. She clutched a ragged doll to her chest, as if it were her last breath. "Please, mister," she stammered, her voice shaking as the wind whipped around her. They've beaten my mama. She's dying." The storm seemed to pause. Elias's jaw tightened. He looked past her into the black curtain of rain, searching for shapes in the dark. None, just the crying wind. "Where?" he asked, his voice deep, gravelly. "Down the creek. Our house, by the old mill." He hesitated. Every instinct told him to shut the door. Whatever trouble this girl carried wasn't his. But when her small hand reached out, trembling, and touched his coat sleeve, Elias saw something in her eyes. The same fear his boy had shown when the fever came for him. He grabbed his hat, shrugged on his coat, and took his rifle. "Come on," he said gruffly. "Show me." They rode out into the storm on his horse, the girl clinging to him for warmth, her little hands gripping his coat. The rain fell in heavy sheets, soaking through to his bones. The plain stretched endlessly, shadows of mesquite trees bending like ghosts in the wind. The girl spoke in bits and pieces, her voice faint against the thunder. "They came after dark, men from town. Said Papa owed money. Mama said he paid, but they didn't listen. They broke the door. They hit her, and she couldn't finish." Elias's teeth clenched. He'd heard of Clive Merrow's men before, ruthless collectors who'd been forcing small homesteaders off their land. If they'd gone after a woman and child, that was more than greed, it was evil. The horse slipped in the mud. Lightning flashed, lighting up the girl's pale face. Elias steadied the animal, glancing down at her. She was shivering, trying to stay brave. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her. "Keep that on," he said. "We're almost there." For a long stretch, neither spoke. The wind screamed through the valley, and Elias's mind wandered back to the day he buried his family. The smell of wet earth, the weight of silence. He had told himself he'd never care again, because caring meant losing. But this little one, broken and lost, stirred something buried deep in him. When they finally reached the clearing, smoke hung in the air. The girl pointed ahead. "That's our house," she whispered. The cabin by the creek was barely standing. One side had collapsed inward, and the roof sagged from the rain. Elias dismounted and told her to stay put. The ground was soft with mud and ash as he stepped inside, rifle raised. The lantern by the window flickered weakly. A woman lay on the floor, half covered by a torn quilt, her face pale and streaked with blood. Elias knelt beside her, checked her pulse. Faint, but there. She opened her eyes slowly, struggling to focus. "Elias," she croaked, her lips trembling. "It's you." He froze. Her voice reached across the years like a ghost. He remembered her now. Sarah, the seamstress who once worked for his wife. She used to bring dresses to the ranch, smiling shyly as his wife paid her in silver coins and tea. "Sarah," he murmured. She tried to smile but coughed instead. "They took everything, said we owed. I tried to fight." Her eyes darted toward the girl outside. "Lila, is she safe?" "She's right there," Elias said. "She's fine." Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for his. "Don't let them take her." Before he could answer, the distant thud of hooves echoed through the rain. Elias rose, scanning the darkness. 3, maybe 4 riders, heading fast this way. He turned back to Sarah, his voice low but steady. "They're coming. I'll get you both out." She tried to speak again, but he placed a finger gently on her lips. Then he moved to the door, his massive frame silhouetted against the flickering light. Outside, the rain had softened to a steady whisper, and through it came the unmistakable jingle of spurs. Elias loaded his rifle. His pulse was calm, controlled. The storm wasn't outside anymore, it was inside him. He looked once more at the little girl, huddled in the doorway, eyes wide with fear. "Get behind me," he said. The sound of the approaching hooves grew louder. Figures emerged from the rain, shadows on horseback, torches flickering in their hands. Elias stepped forward, boots sinking into the mud, lightning flashing across his face. The girl whispered, "They're the ones, mister." He leveled his rifle, eyes cold as the storm itself. "I figured." And as the first torch was raised, the thunder rolled again, louder, closer, like the mountains themselves had come to watch what would happen next. The storm had thinned to a cold drizzle by dawn, the sky heavy with smoke and the copper tang of blood. Elias crouched behind the half-broken wall, his rifle steady, the girl clutching his sleeve. Beyond the yard, 3 horsemen circled the ruined cabin. Their torches hissed in the wet air, throwing twisted shadows against the trees. Elias could make out their voices, rough, slurred, full of arrogance. "Ain't nobody left alive," one of them said. "The boss'll want proof." Another replied, "You sure about that? I saw 2 horses' tracks coming in." Elias's pulse slowed. He counted the seconds between lightning flashes. 3 men, 2 rifles, 1 shotgun. If they came closer, there'd be no running. He leaned down, whispering to the little girl, "Stay with your mama. Don't make a sound." She nodded, tears mixing with the rain. Her tiny fingers gripped his coat until he gently pried them off. When the next thunderclap hit, Elias moved. He slipped through the side door like a shadow, crouching low. His boots sank into mud and ash. The nearest rider dismounted, cursing as he poked through the wreckage. Elias waited until the man turned his back. A single crack split the air. The rifle's flash lit up the yard. The man fell before his body hit the ground. The other 2 shouted, wheeling their horses around. One fired blind into the dark, bullets snapping through the rain. Elias rolled behind a trough, reloaded fast. Lightning illuminated his face for a heartbeat. Hard eyes, jaw clenched, soaked hair plastered to his forehead. Another shot, another scream. One horse bolted into the night, riderless. The last man, older and meaner than the rest, turned his horse and fled toward the ridge. His voice carried through the wind. "You're dead, Brogan. You hear me? Merrill'll skin you alive." Elias stood still, smoke curling from his rifle. He watched the man disappear into the trees. Then the silence returned, broken only by the girl's sobs. Inside, Sarah's breath rattled in her chest. Elias knelt beside her. Her skin had gone gray, lips trembling. He tore a piece of cloth from his coat and pressed it against the wound in her side, but he could already see it was too deep. She tried to speak. "He sent them. Clive Merrill. Said I owed him the land. I said no. He said, then it ain't yours anymore." Elias's jaw tightened. He remembered Merrill, a slick, cruel man who'd built his fortune stealing the dreams of others. Elias had once refused to sell him a single acre. That was years ago, before the fever took his family. He'd thought Merrill forgotten him. "He's still buying souls," Elias muttered. From outside came the crunch of footsteps. Not hooves this time, bare feet, light as air. Elias turned sharply, rifle raised. A tall figure stood at the doorway, bow in hand. Dark eyes watched him beneath a wide-brimmed hat of deer hide. The man didn't flinch at the rifle pointed his way. "You make too much noise," the stranger said quietly. His voice was calm, the English smooth but careful. "Others will come." Elias's finger stayed on the trigger. "Who the hell are you?" The stranger didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the forest, then back at Elias. "Name is Tashka. Hunter. I saw smoke. Heard shots." He nodded toward the girl. "She is yours." Elias shook his head. "Her mama's. Dying." Tashka stepped inside, kneeling beside the woman. His movements were slow, deliberate. He touched her wrist, frowned, and then met Elias's eyes. "She needs rest." "Not here." Elias hesitated. He didn't trust easily, and he trusted strangers even less. But the quiet certainty in the man's voice cut through the noise in his head. He nodded. "Help me get her up." Together, they lifted Sarah onto a makeshift stretcher. The rain had stopped, but the sky still looked angry, as though the storm hadn't finished what it started. They moved through the forest, guided by Tashka's sure steps. The girl walked beside them, holding her doll tight, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. By the time they reached an old miner's cabin tucked deep in the pines, dawn had turned the world gray. Smoke rose from the chimney. Tashka had been there before. Inside, the place was clean, sparse, but dry. He started a fire, and Elias laid Sarah gently by the warmth. Tashka ground herbs into a paste and pressed them against the wound. Sarah groaned, but didn't wake. The girl crawled to her mother's side, whispering, "Mama, wake up, please." Elias turned away, his fists tight. "She won't make it." "Will she?" Tashka's eyes met his. "Maybe. Maybe not. But she will rest better if you keep her child calm." For a long time, Elias said nothing. He stared into the fire, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. "You're Lakota?" Tashka nodded. "What's left of one?" They sat in silence. Outside, the forest dripped with rain. The girl had fallen asleep beside her mother, and for the first time since the storm began, the air inside the cabin felt almost still. When night came again, Sarah stirred. Her hand reached weakly toward Elias. He leaned close, catching the faintest whisper. "You remember me?" she breathed. "From your ranch? Your wife. She was kind. You were kind too, once." Elias's throat tightened. "That was a long time ago. She believed you had a good heart," Sarah said. Her voice was fading, every word a struggle. "Don't let it die, Elias. Protect her. She's all I got left." Her fingers slipped from his, and she closed her eyes. Elias sat there, unmoving, listening to the small sound of her breath, slow, fading, then gone. He rose quietly and stepped outside. The forest was silent, the sky washed in cold moonlight. Somewhere far off, wolves howled. Tashka appeared beside him, silent as ever. "They will come again," he said. "The one who ran, he will tell his master." Elias looked out toward the distant lights of Bitter Creek, his jaw hardening. "Then we'll be ready." Tashka nodded. "I know a place. High ground. Safe for now." Elias turned back toward the cabin, where the girl slept by the fire, clutching her mother's hand. His voice was rough when he said, "We leave at dawn." The flames crackled behind them, throwing long shadows against the walls. Beyond the pines, thunder rumbled once more, distant but coming. Neither man spoke after that. The night held its breath, as if even the wild itself knew that something was coming for them both. And when Elias finally lay down beside the dying fire, his hand resting on the rifle, one thought pulsed through his mind. He'd promised a dying woman he'd protect her child. And come hell, storm, or bullet, he meant to keep it. The sky the next morning bled red over the Bitter Creek hills, as if the dawn itself had been wounded. Elias stood outside the old miner's cabin, tightening the saddle on his horse. The air was sharp, filled with the scent of pine and smoke. He hadn't slept. His thoughts wouldn't let him. Inside, the girl still slept, curled beside the fire. Her small hand rested against the cold fingers of her mother. Elias hadn't found the strength to move her body yet. When he looked at them, something deep in his chest twisted, a feeling he thought he'd buried years ago when he lost his family. Tashka moved silently around the camp, eyes scanning the tree line. "They come," he said simply. Tracks on the lower trail. 10, maybe more. Elias didn't look up. Marrow's men. Yes. Then we split. You take the girl north through the woods. I'll draw them away. Tashka frowned. You'll die. Elias loaded his rifle. Maybe, but not before I make them earn it. The Lakota studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. I will take her to the high pass. We meet when it is done. When Elias stepped back into the cabin, the girl was awake. Her big brown eyes looked hollow, like something had been taken from her that could never return. She whispered, Mama's not waking up. He crouched beside her, his huge hand resting gently on her shoulder. She's gone, sweetheart, but you're safe now. I'm going to make sure you stay that way. She sniffled and nodded. You promise? I promise. He took his hat off, bowing his head briefly over Sarah's still body. No prayers. Elias had long since stopped believing God listened to men like him. But he made one anyway, silent and rough-edged. I'll get her safe, no matter what it takes. Moments later, Tashka led the girl through the woods, her small form disappearing between the trees. Elias stayed behind, waiting for the sound of hooves. It came soon enough. The forest trembled with their arrival. 11 riders, armed to the teeth, eyes sharp with greed. Elias watched from the ridge as they fanned out near the creek. He could see the man who'd escaped the night before, pointing toward the cabin. There! He's here somewhere. Elias smiled grimly. He moved through the trees, fast and silent. When the first rider crossed the clearing, Elias fired. The man toppled from his horse before he could scream. Chaos erupted, shouting, gunfire, smoke. Elias fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He ducked behind trees, moved with purpose, his rifle cracking through the forest like thunder. 2 more fell. A bullet grazed his shoulder, another tore through his coat, but he didn't stop. Then the forest exploded into noise, dogs barking, men shouting, branches snapping. Elias ran, drawing them farther from Tashka and the girl. The chase twisted through ravines and over rocky ground until the first drops of rain began to fall again. When he reached the riverbank, the current was high and wild from the storm. He leapt down into the freezing water, pain shooting through his wounded arm. Behind him, the dogs barked louder. He waded to the far side and climbed into a cave hidden behind a sheet of ivy. Inside, it was cold and dark. His breath came in short bursts, blood dripping from his arm. He pressed his shirt against the wound, teeth gritted. For the first time in years, he wondered if this was it, if maybe the giant of Bitter Creek would finally die in peace. A sound made him turn, a whisper soft as wind. Tashka stepped out of the shadows, the girl behind him. You think I leave you? He said quietly. You bleed loud. Elias let out a short, rough laugh. You brought her back here? She would not leave without you, Tashka said, glancing at the girl. She said you promised. Lila crawled to Elias, clutching his uninjured hand. You can't break a promise, mister. He looked at her, then at Tashka, and something broke open in him. All the years of guilt and silence came flooding out. He lowered his head. My wife, my boy, they died because I couldn't save them. Fever took him in 2 nights. I buried them right by the house. I swore I'd never care for anyone again. Tashka crouched beside him, mixing herbs with water. And yet, here you are. He pressed the poultice to Elias's wound. You carry ghosts, white man. But this girl needs a man, not a grave. Elias met his eyes, breathing hard. And what about you, ghost walker? What do you carry? Tashka's gaze drifted toward the rain outside. My people, all gone. I walk so I don't forget their faces. The cave fell silent except for the rain. Lila had fallen asleep against Elias's side, her tiny hand still gripping his. He looked down at her, something fierce and protective burning behind his tired eyes. Then we walked together, he said quietly. At dawn, the rain had stopped. They buried Sarah beneath a willow by the river. Elias marked the grave with a simple cross made of branches. Lila stood beside him, her hand in his, tears streaking down her cheeks. Say goodbye, he murmured. Goodbye, Mama, she whispered. I'll be brave. He swallowed hard, his voice rough. You already are. They rode north, following the mountain trails. The next few days were a blur of movement and exhaustion. Tashka taught Elias how to move unseen through the forest, how to listen for danger before it came. Elias, in turn, taught him how to fire a rifle with precision. They spoke little, but trust grew in the silence between them. Lila began to smile again. She fed the horses, collected firewood, even laughed once when Tashka showed her how to mimic a wolf's call. For the first time, the heavy air around Elias began to lift. One night, as they camped near a ridge overlooking Bitter Creek, they saw smoke on the horizon. Elias's stomach turned cold. His ranch. He stood, fists clenched. They've set fire to my land. Tashka looked up. Your home. He nodded. And hers. Sarah's grave is there. The Lakota's eyes narrowed. Then we go back. Elias looked at the glow in the distance, red against the night sky. He could almost hear Merrow's laughter on the wind. Rage and grief mixed inside him, sharp and heavy. He turned to Tashka, his voice low and certain. No man burns my land or hers. Tashka nodded. Then tomorrow we hunt. Elias gripped the rifle, his wounded arm still aching, but his resolve stronger than iron. Behind him, Lila slept peacefully, unaware of the storm about to break again. He watched the horizon until dawn, the flames of Bitter Creek flickering like ghosts in the distance. And as the first light touched the valley, Elias Brogan made a silent vow. This time, the fire would burn for justice. Night fell over Bitter Creek like a black shroud. The flames of the burning ranch painted the valley in shades of blood and ash. The giant of Bitter Creek, Elias Brogan, rode through the smoke with his hat low and rifle ready. Behind him, Tashka moved like a shadow, his bow slung across his back. Neither man spoke. Words were useless now. They reached the ridge overlooking the ranch. What had once been Elias's home was now a smoking ruin. Barn collapsed, fences charred, the corral gates twisted open. Merrow's men had made camp in the yard, their laughter carried by the wind. Torches burned bright, casting orange light over stolen horses and wagons loaded with supplies. Elias's jaw tightened. He'd built that land with his own hands, plowed those fields with his wife watching from the porch. Now it was nothing but ashes and thieves. Tashka crouched beside him. Too many, he whispered. 15, maybe more. Elias's voice was calm. Then we'll take them one at a time. Tashka studied him, then nodded. The wind is ours. They won't hear until it's too late. They moved like ghosts. The first guard by the well didn't even see Tashka's arrow before it found his throat. The second fell with a soft grunt, Elias's knife flashing once under the torchlight. Slowly, they circled the camp, cutting it down piece by piece. Elias was a different man now. Cold, focused, unstoppable. Every shot he fired was deliberate, every breath measured. He felt no fear, no hesitation, only purpose. But when the camp finally stirred and the shouting began, the real storm broke loose. Gunfire roared through the night. Men scrambled for rifles, horses screamed, torches fell into the hay. Elias strode through the chaos like something carved from iron. He fired twice, dropped 2 men, then swung his rifle like a club into the face of another. The sound of bone cracking mixed with the rising roar of flames. Tashka moved through the shadows, loosing arrows that found their marks with deadly silence. The air smelled of blood and smoke. And then, Merrow's voice. Brogan, he shouted, stepping from the stables with a pistol in hand. His black coat shimmered with rain and sweat. You think you can take from me, you washed-up ox? You and your redskin friend. Elias turned, eyes blazing. You burned my land. You beat a woman and left her to die. Merrow sneered. She was in the way. So are you. They faced each other as the barn burned behind them, sparks falling like snow. Elias dropped his rifle and stepped forward. No guns, he said. You want to call yourself a man? Then fight like one. Merrow's grin twisted. Gladly. The two collided like bulls, fists and fury. Mud splattered under their boots. Elias took a blow to the ribs, but didn't fall. He drove his elbow into Merrow's jaw, then his knee into the man's gut. The fight was brutal, primal, years of rage exploding in the rain. Merrow reached for his hidden pistol. Elias saw the glint too late. The shot rang out, fire and thunder. Pain tore through Elias's shoulder. Before Marrow could fire again, a sharp whistle cut the air. Tashka's arrow struck him in the chest, piercing clean through. Marrow staggered, eyes wide, and dropped to his knees in the mud. He tried to speak, blood bubbling from his lips. "You can't stop it. The land'll be mine." Elias stood over him, chest heaving, rain washing the blood from his hands. Not anymore. Marrow collapsed face first into the mud. The fire behind them hissed as the rain began to pour harder, smothering the last of the flames. When the silence finally came, Elias looked toward the ridge. The little girl stood there, wrapped in Tashka's blanket, eyes wide and shining with tears. He walked to her slowly, pain in every step. "It's done," he said softly. "It's over." She threw her arms around him, her small voice breaking. "I was scared you wouldn't come back." He knelt, holding her close. "I promised, didn't I?" Tashka joined them, his face calm but weary. "The storm is over," he said. "For now." Elias glanced at him. "You got a place to go?" Tashka shook his head. "I go where the wind takes me." Elias nodded slowly. "You ever need a place to rest? There'll be one here." Tashka's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then maybe I will come back, when the snow melts." They watched him disappear into the pines, his figure fading into mist. The valley was quiet again. Broken fences, scorched earth, but still alive. Weeks passed. The smoke cleared. Elias rebuilt the house plank by plank. The girl, Lila, helped where she could, her laughter slowly returning to the land. She named one of the horses Sunshine, though the name made Elias laugh every time. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Elias stood by the creek, looking down at two wooden crosses, one for his wife and son, one for Sarah. Lila's small hand slipped into his. "Do you miss them?" she asked. "Every day," he said quietly, "but it don't hurt the same anymore." "Why?" He looked out at the horizon. "Because I got someone new to take care of, and she's about as stubborn as I am." Lila giggled, then grew quiet. "You think Mama can see us?" Elias nodded. "Yeah, I reckon she can." The wind moved through the grass, carrying the soft scent of sage and ash. Elias took a deep breath and smiled faintly. "You saved me, little one," he said. "More than I ever saved you." The camera would pull back slowly then, showing the wide Montana Valley bathed in gold light, the rebuilt ranch standing proud against the fading day. A deep, steady voice, narrator's tone, would carry the final words. In the Wild West, justice didn't wear a badge. It came from men who refused to bow, and hearts that learned to fight again. Elias Brogan was one such heart, broken once but never beaten. The screen would fade to black as the sound of the creek mixed with the low hum of wind through the pines. White text appears on the dark screen. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Wild West tales of courage and redemption. The sound of a single horse neighing echoes faintly, then fades into silence.